I heard her voice before I even realized she was home. It came through the half-open door of the hallway, sharp enough to stop me where I stood. "I will never forgive him. Not after everything." She said it like a final judgment, loud enough that whoever she was talking to wouldn't mistake her meaning. She didn't whisper. She didn't hesitate. She just said it, as if forgiveness was a door she had already closed behind her. My hand tightened around the railing. For a second I thought I had misheard, but the tone told me I hadn't. I stepped closer, slow and careful, not wanting to intrude but unable to pull myself away. Then she added, "He knows what he did." And that sentence hit me harder than the first, because I didn't know. I truly didn't know. When she noticed me, she ended the call without even a goodbye. Her eyes brushed past mine for only a breath before she looked away. Her jaw tight, her face cold in a way I had never seen on her. I waited for her to explain. A single sentence, a clue, anything. But she walked past me like I wasn't standing there, like my presence was something she had to move around. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice low, careful. She paused, but only long enough to say, "I don't want to talk about it." Then she grabbed her bag and left the house with fast, angry steps. I didn't hear her car start for almost a full minute. Maybe she sat there crying. Maybe she sat there seething. I wish I knew which one. I stayed in the hallway long after the door clicked shut. The house felt different, quieter in a way that didn't feel peaceful. I leaned against the wall, thinking back to the years I raised her alone after her mother passed. The nights I carried her to bed when she fell asleep on the couch. The mornings she'd run to me with her drawings. The teenage years when she slammed doors, but still hugged me before school. I held on to all those memories like they could explain something, but they didn't explain this. I tried to replay every conversation we'd had in the last month, every argument we didn't have, every moment that might have planted the seed of anger. Nothing made sense. She had been distant, yes. She had rushed through visits, made excuses, answered me with fewer and fewer words, but I thought it was stress. Work, life. I never thought it was me. Her words stayed with me the rest of the night. "I'll never forgive him. He knows what he did." That last one cut deeper each time it echoed, because I didn't. I would have defended myself if I knew what to defend against. When the house finally went dark, I sat in my chair by the window, staring out at the porch light glowing against the night. I tried to search my memory for anything worthy of such anger, anything that could justify a daughter condemning her father without explanation. But I found nothing, nothing at all, and that silence hurt more than any accusation spoken aloud. What would you do if someone you love punished you for a reason you never learned? Her visits changed long before I understood what was happening. She used to come by with a warm hello, a quick hug, or at least a smile. But now, when she stepped through my door, her eyes didn't look for me first. They scanned the room, slow, sharp, judging every corner like she was preparing a report. I could feel it before she even opened her mouth. "You're leaving dishes in the sink again," she said one afternoon, brushing past me before I could answer. She lifted a plate with 2 fingertips, as if it was proof of something worse than simple forgetfulness. "This isn't good, Dad. You're slipping." I told her I had just finished lunch. She didn't respond. She only sighed, the kind of sigh she used to give as a teenager when she didn't want to listen. Except now it carried something colder. She moved things without asking. First small items, then whole drawers. "For safety," she said, while rearranging my medications into a labeled container. "Older folks forget things. You'll thank me later." I watched her fingertips move across my belongings, touching pieces of my life like they didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to upset her. But each change felt like a step taken away from who I still believed I was. A week later, my neighbor, Mrs. Whitlow, knocked on my door holding a plate of cookies. She looked worried, too worried for a simple visit. She said, "You're having a hard time," she whispered gently. "I just wanted to check on you." I stood there stunned, wondering why my daughter was sharing stories about me, stories I didn't even recognize. The next change was my phone. She picked it up whenever it rang during her visits. "He's resting," she would say, or, "I'll tell him you called." Later, she put her hand on my shoulder. "You don't need all these interruptions. Let me screen your calls. You'll feel better." She said it softly, but her tone left little room for disagreement. Then she brought him, her partner, a man with polite smiles and eyes that never stayed still. "He helps older folks stay organized," she told me, placing a firm hand on my arm. "He knows all the tricks to make life easier." He walked through my house like he was already familiar with it. complimenting the space while studying every detail. Something about him tightened my chest. The first piece of mail that went missing felt like a misunderstanding. The second felt like a warning. "It must have been delivered to the wrong house," she said too quickly. But I remembered leaving a bill on the table, and now it was gone. She waved her hand dismissively. "Dad, you probably misplaced it. Don't worry." But I did. Because every visit felt less like care and more like evaluation, as if she were measuring how much of myself I had left. And every time she walked out the door, I felt smaller than when she arrived. For the first time, I wondered if I was being prepared for a life I didn't choose. The first envelope didn't bother me much. It looked like routine bank mail, plain, white, nothing unusual. But inside was a notice thanking me for updating my automatic transfers. I stared at the page, reading each line twice. I hadn't changed anything. I hardly touched my accounts without checking the numbers 3 times. When I asked my daughter about it during her next visit, she barely looked up from her phone. "Dad, we already handled that. Don't you remember?" Her voice was soft, practiced, almost gentle, but it didn't match the knot forming in my stomach. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her tone made me feel like a child being corrected, not a father being respected. The second envelope arrived 3 days later, an insurance statement about a policy I didn't even know I had. Again, she brushed it off. "You signed for that months ago," she insisted. "Maybe you're mixing dates up." Her words didn't cut like anger. They cut like doubt. And doubt is harder to fight because it sinks slowly, quietly, into all the places you trust yourself. One afternoon, I went to my desk to look for my checkbook. The drawer didn't open, locked. I tried the key I had used for 20 years, and it didn't fit anymore. Someone had changed the lock. When I mentioned it to her later, she sighed in that tired, disappointed way again. "Dad, you said I could hold on to your checks so you wouldn't lose them." I never said that, not once. Worse, her partner began showing a strange interest in my financial habits. He asked harmless questions at first. "Do you bank locally or online?" But then he asked about account numbers, balances, and whether my home was paid off. He always phrased it like concern, just trying to help older folks stay secure. But his eyes told another story. They lingered whenever money came up, sharp and measuring. That night, I opened a small notebook from the kitchen drawer and began writing things down. Dates, letters, words she said, words he said. I kept the notebook flat under a stack of old magazines, hidden but reachable. The more I watched, the more things didn't add up. A bill marked paid that I never opened, a bank balance lower than I remembered, a voicemail from a financial office saying, "We received your forms." What forms? What request? What signature? Every inconsistency tightened the air around me. I felt like someone had entered the quiet parts of my life, the parts I had always kept private, and rearranged them without my permission. And then came the line in one notice that froze me completely. "As per your designated financial representative." I didn't have one. I never assigned one. I held the paper in my shaking hands, trying to understand how my name could appear on something I never touched. For the first time, I wondered if someone was building a future for me, one where I had no control at all. The first time she said it out loud, I felt something inside me shrink. We were sitting in the doctor's office for a routine checkup. Nothing serious, nothing unusual. But when the doctor asked how I'd been managing at home, she answered before I could even open my mouth. "He gets confused sometimes," she said quietly, like she was protecting me. "He forgets things. Dates, details, conversations." I turned to look at her, waiting for her to laugh, to wave it off as a misunderstanding. She didn't. She kept her eyes on the doctor, her voice steady, almost clinical. I felt the floor tilt slightly beneath me. The doctor nodded, writing something on his screen. When I asked what he was noting, he said he would update the chart and suggested I consider bringing her to future appointments. It was the first time I felt my own voice slipping out of my hands. Later, at home, I tried logging into my medical records to see what he had written. My password didn't work. I tried again. Nothing. When I called the clinic, they told me my access had been updated and the primary contact on my file could help reset it. The primary contact was her. I never asked for that. I never approved it. She came over the next day with a folder of papers, thin sheets labeled safety planning and support documents. The titles sounded harmless, but when I read the fine print, my stomach tightened. These weren't safety documents. They were early drafts of financial permissions and power of attorney forms. She had highlighted the signature lines, saying, "These will help if something ever happens to you. If, not when, not in the distant future. If," spoken like she expected something to go wrong soon. My appointments began shifting without warning. I showed up twice only to learn she had rescheduled them. "You get mixed up with dates," she said, her tone full of concern but her eyes cold and sure. "Let me handle it." Mail started disappearing too, not all at once, but in a pattern I couldn't ignore. A medical bill that never arrived, a reminder I never saw, a letter about insurance that vanished before I could read it. When I asked, she said she was sorting things to make life easier. Easier for who? I started catching myself in conversations, choosing my words like stepping stones across an icy pond. If I hesitated even once, if I reached for a name or repeated a sentence, she would give me a slow, pitying look that made me feel 90 years old. So I spoke less. I revealed less. I allowed silence to fill the spaces where trust used to live. The worst moment came late one evening, when I realized something simple but terrifying. If she told the world I was losing my memory, I didn't have enough proof left to argue otherwise. And that fear settled in deeper than anything before. Have you ever feared someone could rewrite your story while you were still alive? I wasn't looking for proof. I was only trying to find a bill I thought I had misplaced. But when I reached into the small drawer she rarely bothered with, the one tucked beneath old envelopes and pens, I found a stack of bank statements she must have forgotten to remove. My heart tightened as I slid them out, the paper cool and heavy in my hands. The first page showed a withdrawal I didn't remember making. The second showed a transfer to an account I'd never heard of. By the third, my chest felt hollow. Each number sat on the page like a bruise, small, but painful enough to warn me something deeper was happening. There were notes in the margins, phone calls listed at times I knew I had been home alone, deposits that didn't belong, line items appearing and disappearing like someone was testing how much I would notice. And attached to one statement was a small printed receipt with her initials, next to her partner's account number. I sat quietly at the kitchen table, letting the shock move through me without giving it power. I traced the dates with my finger, moving from one month to the next, until a slow, terrible pattern took shape. Money had been moved in steps, gentle ones at first, small transfers, tiny withdrawals, then larger sums, as if someone grew braver each time I didn't speak up. My first instinct was to confront her, but I stopped myself. Anger would only confirm the image she was painting of me, confused, emotional, unstable. So I breathed slowly and began writing everything down. Dates, amounts, phone numbers, transaction codes. I kept my handwriting steady, even when my fingers shook. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of control return. The next morning, I walked to the bank alone. I asked to speak with someone privately. No daughter, no partner, no helpful voices guiding my choices. When the manager called my name, I followed him into his office and placed the papers on his desk. He read the statements carefully, his brow tightening with every page. When he finally looked up, there was no confusion in his eyes, only concern. "Did you authorize any of these transfers?" he asked. "No," I said quietly. He leaned back, hands folded, and told me something that made my stomach drop. The account linked to the transfers wasn't mine, and there were several attempts to change my contact information. He said the bank would begin a review immediately and recommended I freeze certain access points. It wasn't dramatic. No alarms, no shouting. Just a quiet moment of truth spoken out loud by a professional who didn't know my daughter at all. As I walked home, the air felt heavier than it had in weeks. But inside that weight was something steady, an understanding that I had to protect myself now, even if it shattered whatever remained between us. Because silence had cost me enough already. The bank manager called me back 2 days after our meeting. His voice was steady, but there was a seriousness beneath it that made me grip the phone a little tighter. He asked me to come in again, alone, and I knew before I even stepped out my front door that something had shifted. When I arrived, he didn't take me to his desk this time. He led me into a small private room, the kind they used for difficult conversations. He closed the door softly and unfolded a folder filled with printed pages, each one marked with highlights and notes. "We reviewed the transactions you brought," he said. "There are several inconsistencies that can't be explained by routine activity." He tapped the first page. "These withdrawals were made from an ATM across town. Do you remember going there?" I shook my head. He continued. "And here, Someone attempted to change your contact information. Twice. He looked up at me then, his expression tightening. Why is your daughter's name active on your accounts? Did you intend for her to have this level of access? The question hit me harder than I expected. I felt the same hollow ache return, the one that had been growing ever since she began treating me like a task instead of a parent. No, I said quietly. She told me it was temporary, just to help. He nodded slowly, almost sympathetically. Mr. Betrayal Firstones, what we're seeing aligns with several early indicators of financial exploitation. The words hung in the air like a final diagnosis. He explained that the bank had already triggered a formal internal review. My accounts were being secured. Her access was paused. A fraud specialist was looking through months of activity I hadn't even known existed. And because the situation involved a close family member, the bank was required to notify the local Elder Protection Office. The manager asked if I had more documentation. So I opened my folder, the one I had filled with weeks of quiet notes, dates, small details, and the papers she had forgotten to hide. I placed each one in front of him. He studied them slowly, carefully, with a gravity that told me he understood the weight behind every line I had written. These documents help a lot, he said. You did the right thing. Hearing that felt like a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that I wasn't imagining things. Sorrow that the truth I had tried so hard to avoid was now in front of a stranger who could see it clearer than I ever allowed myself to. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Elder Protection Services. The caseworker's voice was calm and professional, but firm. She said they had reviewed the preliminary findings and were opening a case. There were signs of coercion, signs of unauthorized control, signs that someone close to me had taken more than money. They had taken advantage of trust. When the call ended, I sat in my quiet living room, hands folded, heart aching in a way I didn't have words for. I had thought the betrayal was painful already, but now I understood it ran far deeper than I ever imagined. I asked her to stop by the house. I didn't tell her why. I just said we needed to talk. She walked in with the same distant look she'd worn for months, like she was already somewhere else, already annoyed, already tired of me before I even opened my mouth. I sat at the table with the folder the bank manager helped me prepare. Papers neatly arranged, dates highlighted, signatures circled. She barely glanced at it. What now? She said, arms crossed. I kept my voice calm. I had rehearsed this moment so many times that my hands didn't shake anymore. I want you to look at these transactions, and these change requests, and these withdrawals. She rolled her eyes. Dad, you're doing it again, twisting everything. You always make yourself the victim. I slid the first sheet toward her. The ATM withdrawals made while I was home on the phone with her. Then the address change request filed from her laptop's IP address. Then the automatic transfer to an account linked to her partner. She didn't touch a single page. This doesn't prove anything, she said sharply. You probably forgot. You've been forgetting things a lot. The words didn't hit me the way they used to. Not after hearing professionals confirm exactly what had been happening. I didn't forget, I said. And the bank knows I didn't forget. That made her shift, just slightly, but enough. I opened the final document, an official notice from the bank stating her access had been removed pending investigation. Her partner's name was referenced. That was when her expression changed from annoyance to alarm. You shouldn't have talked to them, she snapped. You're making a mess for no reason. They found a reason, I replied quietly. Right then, as if timed by fate, the doorbell rang. 2 officials stood outside, one from the bank's fraud division, the other from Elder Protection Services. They asked her to sit with us while they reviewed the written warnings. She stayed standing. The caseworker read through the findings in a steady tone. Unauthorized activity, attempted account changes, third-party benefit, indicators of coercion and financial control. Each point landed like a stone dropping into deep water. My daughter shook her head harder with every line. None of this is true. He's imagining things. He's doing this to punish me. But every accusation she threw at me dissolved the moment the officials pointed back to the evidence. Dates, IP logs, surveillance timestamps, account links, facts she couldn't outrun. Her partner's involvement was no longer a suspicion. It was documented. At the end of it, she stood silent, jaw tight, hands clenched. Not a single word of remorse, not even a moment of hesitation. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted freedom from accountability. When the officials left, she walked out without saying goodbye. I watched her. disappear down the path, each step taking her further from the daughter I once knew. The house felt unbearably quiet, and for the first time, I understood she chose this path long before I ever spoke the truth aloud. If someone refused to admit the truth, even with proof in front of them, what would you do next? The house feels different now. Not safer, not warmer, just quieter. The kind of quiet that settles into the walls and stays there, like dust you can't ever fully sweep away. After the investigation ended and the accounts were secured, life didn't snap back into place the way I once hoped it would. Instead, it returned in small pieces: morning routines, careful planning, slow walks around the block. Independence, yes, but carried with a heaviness I never expected to know this late in life. I make my own breakfast again. I handle my bills myself. I keep a small notebook on the table with dates, reminders, and the numbers that matter. I don't write in it because I'm forgetting things. I write in it because I've earned the right to trust my own memory. I won't let anyone take that from me again. Some evenings, I sit in the living room with the lamp on and let the silence settle around me. I think about trust, how easily it can be broken, how impossible it is to rebuild when the break comes from someone you held as a child. I raised my daughter with every intention of giving her a good life. I worked extra shifts, missed sleep, stretched money when it barely stretched at all. I told myself that love meant sacrifice. But now, in these late years, I see that sacrifice without understanding becomes a shadow you never escape. I still don't know what she meant when she said she would never forgive me. I've turned those words over in my mind like a stone that never smooths out. Maybe there was a misunderstanding I never knew about. Maybe she carried bitterness I never saw forming. Or maybe blaming me was easier than facing her own choices. I may never learn the answer. And that's the part that hurts the most, the unanswered blame. The idea that someone you loved so deeply could punish you for something you never even knew existed. It settles into your chest and sits there, cold and heavy. Some wounds don't heal because they never had a beginning you could understand. Still, I've learned something. Aging doesn't mean surrendering your dignity. Growing old doesn't mean allowing others to rewrite your story. I lost pieces of myself during all of this. Trust, certainty, the comfort of believing my daughter would stand by me. But I also found a quiet kind of strength I didn't expect. The strength to protect myself, to seek help, to insist that my voice still matters. Sometimes, in the late hours, I wonder what a parent is supposed to do when love is returned with blame instead of gratitude. How do you carry the weight of a punishment for a mystery you never committed? I don't have an answer, but I do know this. I won't let the final years of my life be shaped by someone else's silence. I will carry myself with the dignity I've earned. Have you ever been blamed for something you never even knew existed?